your teams. A phrase that I often remind myself, and it's one that I steal from Danny Silk, my co-author, and that is this idea of, do you want to be a garbage dump or a grocery store on any given day? And so, as a social worker, I can go to meetings with the leadership teams, well-being teams, culture teams, whatever the school's calling it, and we can just dump about students, or it just becomes like a fest of sharing all our frustrations and not expanding our ideas. Or people can approach me as a grocery store of, this is all the tools that I can use to connect, to help you make sense of that behavior. And so my focus has been on understanding human behavior, what drives human behavior, developmentally, incrementally, and also taking a lot of care to start to understand the patterns and the seasons that happen through different periods of time in schooling, so that I can create a common language. And I think, one of the myths I find about schools is, and let's be fair, this is an organizational myth, is this idea that we just need consistency. And if it was consistent, everything would go away, which is a ludicrous idea, because we're so many different humans and we're going to react in different ways. So my consistent and your consistent, we might be consistent to us, but it's going to look different. And so I prefer predictability. What can we predict? What are the patterns? And so working in those teams, I think it's really important to sit down and kind of map out the pattern that we're seeing for the student or for the family or for the cohort, so that we can anticipate where are the needs going to be best met. So often, I think, with whether it's behavior or even well-being with staff, we're seeing this in, I think, education at the moment, with a lot of the staff self-care. And we're just shooting arrows in the dark. Like, if we bring donuts to your staff room, you'll be happy. Or if we let you wear jeans one day a week, you'll be happy. It's like, those things.
Well, Mr. Clark After Dark is brought to you by Luxy. That's Luxy. Luxy is the standard for modern dating, as it gives you a greater understanding of a potential match's intentions and background before you make your move. Swiping endlessly on other dating apps can be exhausting and often leaves you with only the leftovers in your dating pool. Luxy is an exclusive platform with just a 10 to 15% acceptance rate, as well as a profile and income verification feature, so you can be confident you're only connecting with those who meet your high standards. Their community guidelines emphasize safety, trust, and quality by strictly prohibiting scams, explicit content, and harassment. 2025 is your year to stop settling. With Luxy, there is no luck involved, just real connections with people who truly match what it is you are looking for. Download the Luxy app today to see if you qualify for a better chance of finding the right person for you. And now, back to the show.
Nothing to do with the problem.
Because I was actually reading in your book this morning, so I was kind of going through chapters 5, 6, and 7 specifically. But it was like the idea of kind of having the opposite of a carrot at the end is like it acts as like a soothing mechanism. So like, why are we kind of building problems that need to be soothed? So like, that's not necessarily the foundation that we want. And donuts, I mean, I like a good donut every now and then, but I mean, conditions are much better than the neediness of the donut in the first place. But.
Well, exactly. And the donut does not change the hurt feelings. There's nobody who ever got, food at a staff meeting and went, "Oh, the school loves me." Like, that wasn't the solution. It just was short-term happiness. And I think so often we treat adults in the same way we treat children. We just treat humans the same, and we don't learn new strategies and tools. The idea of joyful responsibility that I talk through in my book is, how do we walk on an incremental journey of learning to be happy from within, joyful from within, when responsibility comes our way? So increasingly managing levels of freedom. So when they're 5, we're giving them a certain amount of freedom. We're helping them learn how to manage that freedom well. But we tend to kind of almost stop when they hit teenagers, and then we treat our adults almost like they're teenagers, and we continue to give them, bribes with food or rewards. We continue to, reprimand them in the same way. And, we don't actually evolve to expect people can and will manage themselves well. And we don't teach our adults how to be self-sufficient. So how to self-soothe, how to regulate, how to understand what's going on for themselves, how to unpack, their past belief systems and decide who they want to be. And these are really important traits that if we're not raising our kids through school to learn how to do this for themselves, who's going to show them as adults? Is your boss sitting down with you and showing you how to, self-regulate? How are they going with self-regulating? And so these are important skills that we're missing from our workplaces and so I guess, a lot of people read Loving Our Students on Purpose, and particularly when we go and run the programs in the schools with the leadership team, usually by week 2, somebody says, oh, this has got nothing to do with the kids. Like, no, it's all about the adults.
Yeah. And that's an important, I guess, place to go. So I guess first what I want to potentially get the perspective on the other side of the world here for I guess how you kind of go about being, I guess, like the social worker within that resource team, because I guess like my experience and like social workers kind of know the ins and outs of like who's on file, who's requested support, and what supports are available, how often they're getting support. And that's kind of, I guess, the tools in their toolbox of what they can provide is, I guess, trying to find them the right connection for someone to kind of discuss their issues with. But I guess from like a school leadership team, we often go like, it's still pretty much, do they need further assessment? I guess, is there kind of the like break books are kind of the common one as well, like kind of giving them that little, I guess, token to potentially get out of class, or maybe give them some more agency over their day. But those kind of seem to be like break books and finding ways for students, I guess, to have a bit more agency over their own time are kind of the main 2 tools that we're using whenever sort of some kind of like behavior comes up.
I think the most common complaint with many of the tools that we have available in schools is that they're creating this experience of chaos, because I think teachers have this narrative that they've given their power away to the students and they don't have control anymore. And I can't hold the student accountable, or I can't, I don't have any strategies because I don't want to use detention, or I don't want to yell, but what do I do instead? And we haven't replaced it with the positive training for how do we set clear boundaries? How do we set clear expectations? How do we build relationship that has boundaries built into it? Because without that, you just have chaos. And certainly over here in Australia, I would say what we are observing in schools is the wellbeing trap, where we have swung so heavily into wellbeing and looking after students, and that staff are too afraid to hold students accountable. Like, what if, the student is, suicidal? What if the student is upset and goes and tells their parents? What if they go to the media? There's so many what ifs around holding accountability that it's become a bit of a free-for-all. And so, of course, anyone looking on over enough time goes, well, that doesn't work. Now we need to swing towards, having high regulation. We need to go back to, I think they've got positive behavior solutions coming out, or the behavior curriculum. We need to teach them how to, and I go, well, you know what? I actually think it's both. In Loving Our Students on Purpose, we talk about how do we create this balance of high responsibility and high relationship. We need rules. We need clarity. Staff need to know that there is a line, that when they get to that line, they can ask for help. And it doesn't mean that they're doing anything wrong. It means they need to get on with teaching, and they need a team to come in and help them with that student so they can go back to teaching their core business. And that team doesn't look on at the teacher and think, oh, you're a terrible teacher. They think, now's my time to do my part to help the student. But my goal isn't for the student to love me as the only person they'll talk to in the school. My goal is to get that student back in your class connected to you. And so I think we've misunderstood this idea of trying to, it's my student, I need to help them, or I need to have all the answers, or I don't want help because I'll look bad. And we need to take this collective approach and start to see how can we integrate as a team, because we all hold a piece of the puzzle. And that student isn't spending 1 year with one teacher. They're spending 13 years with over 100 academic staff. And as they go through that 13-year journey, we pass the student, that baton over and over again. If we can predictably create a system that allows us to have both responsibility and relationship, we're going to create powerful humans who understand how to manage themselves, because we incrementally teach them that. That's a long answer, but I hope that.
No, that's fantastic. And because I guess like one of the main things that I'm seeing in what I can pay attention to is like we use kind of the PBIS modeling positive behavior intervention, where we use, it's like the rewarding positive behavior. We do like 2 draws a week, and I guess everyone always kind of assumes that if something is going well, there's always something that you can do to improve it or make it better still. And I
Mm-hmm.
guess maybe you have to be wary of kind of the improvement trap in a sense. But I do think, like, some of the things that we've talked about at my school is that, okay, let's say for example, you're my student, Bernii. Things aren't going well. You're dysregulated. It's just it's getting chaotic, and I send you out of the room. One of the more common practices in our school is that, like, our principal will actually come cover our class while we go and talk to that student. So
Yeah,
that way you just have a conversation about why there's a
mm-hmm.
disconnect, which I guess
Mm-hmm.
it all kind of comes back to that, while the principal kind of oversees and takes
Mm-hmm.
that 5-10 minutes. Because I think maybe the missing part of even like thinking about myself being disciplined when I was a student is that, like, teachers kind of kick you out, then you go talk to the principal. Then it actually kind of gives a lot of the power to the principal to build that relationship and actually take that next step, while the teacher's still kind of, like, maybe
Mm-hmm.
pissed off is the wrong word, but they're kind of in their mode of, like, they're trying to teach while
Regulated.
also yeah, like, and even the idea that you can just send a kid out and then keep teaching, and not like the entire class dynamic has completely shifted in that moment where you make
Mm-hmm.
that decision. I think that's a
Mm-hmm.
few kind of underrated parts of that as well.
Absolutely. And I think, regardless of whether the teacher is, going out to regulate with the student, I mean, that works really well when the teacher is self-regulating and self-soothing, so they're
Yeah.
co-regulating with the student. If the
Yeah.
teacher's escalated and the student's escalated and
Yeah.
they're both outside their window of tolerance, well, they probably need
Yeah.
minimum 20 minutes apart to come
Yeah.
back into a place where they can reconnect. And
Yeah.
so, that might require the teacher to show maturity and keep teaching the class while that student co-regulates with somebody else.
Yeah.
The key is if they are co-regulating with someone else. I like to think of it like inside out. They kind of go to maybe a person or a place that's designed to help them think through their thoughts. And then they can come back ready to speak to the teacher effectively and with confidence.
Yeah.
So I almost practiced the narrative of how they're going to approach that conversation. As young people, they need a bit more support to do that. The teachers, we hope, will have that maturity to go, I've regulated, I've gone on with teaching. Now that you're back, let's have this conversation. And so whichever way it goes, the people who are doing the co-regulating outside the classroom, the goal must be that they're handing the attachment to the teacher. They're not keeping it for themselves. And
Yeah.
that's why I think that often it can deteriorate when we do have programs like that. That's external to the classroom, because if we're creating our own strong attachment, we want good relationship, but we actually don't want the student to want to stay with us. We want the student to want to be with their teacher. So
Yeah.
it's difficult when ego gets in the way, or pride, or I think I know best, or or if we partner with the chaos and the student tells us how bad the teacher is and we're like, yes, you're right. Like, we want people in those roles who are very good at managing themselves and making sure that they're just helping the student process their thoughts, going back and actually communicate effectively. So not partnering with that chaos, I think, is really important. One of the freeing models that I came across really helped free my mind of is there a right or a wrong way to do this,
Yeah.
is the idea of polarity. And much like breathing, so we all breathe in, we breathe out, and it's like an infinity symbol, that loop that goes around. So we breathe in, it's really good until our lungs are full, and now it's bad. But then we have to breathe in again, it's really good. And so we breathe in, then we breathe out, we breathe in, we breathe out. There's a good part of breathing in, and there's a good part of breathing out. When we breathe out, our lungs are empty, but of course, after a while, it's like we're desperate for air. It's really bad. And so just like that infinity loop, responsibility and relationship actually flow back and forth. There's a really positive relationship, but too much strong relationship without responsibility becomes really bad. And then we swing and we pull up on this responsibility. We add our boundaries and our expectations, but too much boundaries and expectations become rigidity, perfectionism. We can get rebellion. So then we swing back towards high relationship, which is really good for a while until that becomes really bad. And as leaders, we're almost at the crossroad going, oh, we just need to add a little responsibility, a little relationship, a little responsibility, and keeping that balanced perspective. It's at no point do you wake up in the morning, Lucas, and say, I'm just going to breathe in today. No more breathing out.
Yeah.
Like, we wouldn't do that.
Yeah.
We have
No
to have
more of that.
exactly. They're two interdependent poles. They require each other to exist. And we can't separate them. But so many of our behavior management programs, is trying to pursue one over the other, rather than going, we need both. We need to teach students good quality practices and boundaries and structure and strategy, and we need to have good quality relationships. It really doesn't matter what program we're going after. The goal needs to be, how do we reconnect after a disconnect? Look, I think I come across a very similar argument when I'm working with parents with divorced families, because the perspective is, well, we can't change what happens at the other house, so we just have to live with it here. And it's like, well, that's not actually the case. Kids are incredibly resilient to their environment. So you can educate them on how to behave in this environment, what our expectations are here, and they can be one person in one place and a bit different in another place. And that's completely possible. And so I agree that schools are the perfect environment. Kids are there for thousands of hours every year. It's an amazing environment where we can teach them sleep hygiene. And you're right, like the impact on the brain is very similar to alcohol. And without hitting your post like late REM sleep later in the 6 to 8 hours mark, they're not getting memory consolidation happening. And so, when you're getting the 2 hours sleep a night, the impact it's having is driving up the anxiety levels, the vagal system's reacting with hyperactivity. And so there's all sorts of things that are being, impacted by lack of sleep. Environments like schools, it's not a long conversation to drip feed ideas about sleep hygiene and why it's good for you. Here in Australia, these kind of conversations do happen in our schools, which I'm really grateful for. I know my son's school, they had a whole section of their health unit on sleep. And so, that was fantastic because it drove conversations at home, because we'd been saying, minimum 8 to 10 hours at your age. And he says, oh, they said the same thing at school. We're like, excellent. And we started to see the similarity, but I know that not all schools will do that. Some parents will, and some schools will. Sometimes it's coming from one side, but at least they're hearing it somewhere. And the goal is, as they become adults, they're remembering, oh, I did hear this somewhere. I've come across this somewhere. How could this be helpful to me?
Yeah, because I think this is just that dynamic in every marriage. It's like, I could have the cure for cancer, and my wife's still like, I gotta ask my sister about that. Like, not that she doesn't like trust my word or anything, but I think it's the idea of needing to hearing it from multiple places. Like, it's obvious that your parent's going to tell you to sleep. Like, that's an obvious one. Then you hear from your teacher and then your friends as to why. You're like, oh, well, that actually makes sense. Like, what you're saying isn't actually, you actually are looking out for what's best for me. That's a crazy idea. But something I've noticed with the kids. But
and that's a sales psychology right there. You walk into a store, the first person approaches you, tells you about a product, you're like, oh, leave me alone. The second person comes up to you, tells you the same thing, and you buy it from them. And you're like, why do we do this? They know this. Sales psychology knows this, so they don't get offended that you don't listen to them. They send in another person until you're at that place where you're ready. And so sometimes it is the parent, sometimes it's the teacher, sometimes it's the sports coach, sometimes it's a peer. But if none of us are saying it, if nobody's drip feeding this to the students, they're educating themselves with themselves, and they surround themselves with themselves, so they turn out like big teenagers. And that's not what we want for adult society moving forward.
Yeah, and kind of to shift gears, not really, like a little bit. I remember, because I read like the first bit of your book there, but a few months ago when I received it there, and I noticed like your story about Rebecca and Taylor, and like I think it's the very first chapter. And I know you said that you're not a teacher, but this was like a tutoring kind of time for you. I can't remember how old you were at the time, but I guess if you were to kind of, not to dilute the story by any means, but if you were to kind of break that into like 1 to 3 takeaways, especially for a way that like I can walk into my classroom tomorrow and be like, because my kind of main thing is like, you kind of got to make it weird in a sense. Like, you got to say the cheesy thing that's not being said, but you want to say like you don't want to go up to a student to be like, it's not working out, but I care about you. Like, what do we want to do? Like, no one wants to say the I care about you part, because it makes them like feel weird almost. Like, you almost shouldn't be saying that to anyone, because for some reason I think I feel like we've moved beyond the stigma for mental health, but we're not necessarily beyond the stigma of like, like, Bernii, I genuinely care about you. Like, what can we actually do? Like, this is not working. Like, I need to keep sending you out, but So instead of just being mad and sending you off, but I guess to kind of bring that back, I
Mhm.
guess how can that story potentially apply to the way we can do things differently to connect with our students?
Yeah, some phrases that I found really helpful when we're in that position, we feel awkward about saying, I care about you, is simply to say, I've been looking forward to you turning up today. I love having you in my class. I can't wait to see you tomorrow. So phrases that allow them to see, like, when you get into my sphere of influence, I'm happy that you're here. So they can be a
Mm.
really helpful narrative to use. Rebecca and Taylor, look, I was first year out of school. I was 19. I knew nothing at all, but I thought I knew everything. And
Mhm.
how hard could tutoring two teenage girls be, right? But within 3 weeks, I had gotten my car and I went home and I was like, stuff it. You guys can teach yourselves. Now, these girls, if anyone listening, had been suspended for a significant amount of time, 10 weeks. I don't
Yeah.
even think it's legal anymore, but this
Yeah,
is a
don't
long
even
time
yeah,
ago.
that's
And
crazy. Yeah.
so, they were allowed back at school if they passed all their exams, and the school had given their parents permission to have me come and tutor them at an external facility. And they didn't even do subjects that I had done in school. Like, I was clueless, but I had watched my teachers and I knew how to be structure and rules and bribery and fear and yell and all. And really, it took about 3 weeks where I was like, this is ridiculous. Like, this doesn't work. I gave up with frustration. And when Rebecca's mum, and all their names are made up, and changed all the
Yeah.
details, but Rebecca's mum rang and she said, I really actually think you'll get through to them. Why don't you give it another
Yeah.
shot? And I was like, you've got to be kidding me. Like, I even at that point, I'd rather sit on the couch and not have a job. Like, I was like, not
Yeah.
interested. But again, how hard could one more day be? So I went
Yeah.
along and I had had enough time over that weekend, it was a Friday to the Monday, to think through, well, if everything I had done didn't work, what were things that I had observed my teachers doing that did work? And, I had a long history in youth group and camps. I used to go on lots of camps. And so I took strategies from those environments, and particularly my youth leader at the time, who spent a lot of time just listening to me. And I went in and said to them something along the lines of, this isn't fun for me, and it doesn't look like it's fun for you. What would we need to actually do this? And question number one was, do you want to be here learning this stuff? And immediately they were like, absolutely, we really want to pass. We really want to go back to school. And it opened up a conversation where I hadn't even asked them what was going on. Like, how did they feel about the suspension? Because I was being all polite and not wanting to,
Yeah.
poke the bear. And they just broke down in tears and shared the fear that they felt and the shame. And they've been blocked from all their friends. They'd been labeled that kid. So parents had told their kids they couldn't hang with them. They didn't know if they could ever go back to school. Like, they were really scared. And that created a dialogue where I gave the control back, because it's fake control. I didn't actually control them, clearly,
Yeah.
because it wasn't working. But
Yeah.
I realized at that point I didn't control them, and I asked them what they needed from me. And they actually set their own timetable. They set their own break times. They set their own place for their phones to go. They decided when they wanted music and not wanting music, what order of the day was best to do subjects. Like, I know in a school environment, you can't give that much control, but often we can give little things where students can choose between, do you want to sit by the window or, at an island desk? Do you want to sit at the front or the back? Again, we use seating as a way to control, but actually giving whatever the choice is. Do you want the blue chair or the red chair? Do you want to write with, the gray pencil or the blue pencil? Like, does it really matter? Sometimes just giving the students control over the things that they can choose from is significant in helping them feel a sense of agency and participation in the environment. You could go, like, I hated sport. I just wasn't a sporty kid at school. But, my teachers who listened to me and gave me choices and freedom, I would play football. I would, do all these crazy
Yeah.
sporting things simply because the teacher gave me the freedom to do it within that space. Whereas another teacher who was rigid and controlling, I would just sit down and refuse. I could be super disrespectful when I was at school. And I guess, like, if you're a doctor, for example, you don't ever want your doctor that you go to forget what it's like to be a patient. And it's the same with teachers. You don't teach us to forget what it's like to be a student, to remember their experiences and what was positive and negative, and build into your own practice the things that were positive that you actually had. So Rebecca and Taylor for me was where my curiosity got spiked. I'm like, if it was that simple in the end, was that one conversation to open up a dialogue. And Rebecca, the main character from that story, she actually went on and became a school social worker herself, like down the track. It's quite amazing. I get to, champion her and cheer her on. She's an adult with children and family and all that now. But it's opening that place for them to show up and be authentically them. And it required me to be authentically me and be like, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm doing my best, and I'm not coming in to be like, I'm a terrible person and I've got this imposter syndrome and I will never be able to teach you. I didn't come in criticizing myself. I just came in saying, I don't know what you need. Can you tell me what you need in the situation? And they were so excited to tell me, because at that point, after all of the chaos they'd been through with their suspensions, no one had stopped to ask them, what did you need? What did you need when you got into that situation that got you suspended? What were you controlling for? Because we're all controlling for something. Mm-hmm. I really think it's a powerful image to just think about control as like a remote control. If I had a remote control and I could control my class and make them learn, then just think about the buttons that you would choose on that remote. It would be like, do your work, take your hat off, put your phone away. We would all have a mute button, right? And away we would go controlling our students. But we don't have control. It's an illusion that we can control our students. The minute you become a dad and you have that little baby, that thing is not pooping on command or sleeping when you tell it. You learn very quickly that you're not in control of another human. Any young person I've ever sat with, every single student, and I've sat with thousands, all say they want the same thing, and that is control. They want control and a say over their life. So how do we create environments where they have choice, where they can live out this control that they have anyway? So it's an illusion to think that I can make you stop talking. They're going to talk if they want to. Nothing can stop that. In my day, they used to put sticky tape over our mouths to make us stop talking. Still didn't work. Kids still talk.
Yes.
You cannot control another human being. On a good day, you can control yourself, but that's it. And so I suggest that in our environments, and this could sound, if it's taken through a punishment lens, this can sound like policy and rules, but actually I think it's more from the behavior education space, is when we educate our students on, I want you in my class. What it looks like is you sitting quietly doing your work, participating in discussions, recognizing like every teacher has like a tell. Maybe my tell is when if I stand in the middle of the room in that particular space, that's when I expect everyone to be quiet. I raise consciousness and awareness. I tell you what to expect from my environment. When you're not meeting those expectations, this is what I might choose to do. So I'm letting you know now you have a choice. So you can be in this classroom participating freely, but if you're being disrespectful, then you might need to wait and speak to me outside the room, or whatever your school procedure is. Again, I don't say, and I'm very hesitant to say, take away any sort of like punishment if you don't have something to replace it with, because that just leaves teachers with nothing, right?
Yeah.
But if the students are aware that this is how we do things, this is who we are in this classroom or who we are in this school, and we have language around it, then it's a clear choice. And now we have to be happy with whichever choice they make, because they've got control and freedom over their own life. So if you're choosing to be disrespectful, then I need to follow my processes that the school has to follow up with that. Rather than taking that personally and going, oh, I needed you to choose this. When we limit ourselves to the one choice, the one good choice, and say, don't learn about life in front of me, just behave this way, then we're not actually giving them freedom and control. We're trying to control them, and then it fails, which it always will, because we can't control them. And then we come back around to see it didn't work, and then we just loop back around, which is, the nature of the punishment paradigm. So I guess strategy-wise is whatever you're doing, making sure that we explain it really clear to the students. Like, this is what I want for you. This is my goal for you. This is what our school procedure is that I'm going to follow if you make that choice. Is that what you want? And so that's why I love the responsible thinking process, simply because it gives a clear outline of questions. And if kids do that for 13 years, they know them off by heart. What are you doing? What should you be doing? What happens if you keep doing that? Is that what you want? What you do now? It's like the set phrases. And, in prep, which for us is grade 4, your 4 5-year-olds, they will need to do that process thousands of times. You get into grade 10s, 11s, and 12s, the teacher might ask the questions and the kids just, I know what I'm doing. I'll just recalibrate back to what I want to be doing, which is getting my work done. And, they don't actually get to finish the process because they just calibrate naturally. But we don't often have a set of phrases. So every day we're coming up with a new strategy. And that's exhausting for teachers, coming up with new strategy. Having some clever one-liners. So the one-liners that I talk about come from Love and Logic, and they're designed to not argue with the student. I know, probably so. I don't know. Nice try. That may be. So learning some of those phrases off by heart. So you might just tattoo them down your arm. Like, I just need to know these. Because kids will argue. And so rather than get drawn into the argument, have a few phrases that help us segue to get on with the task of learning. So it's those practical strategies of they're all designed for me to manage me. They're not designed for me to manage you. So it's me staying calm, guiding you through a process so that you know what your choices are at the end of it. And you've made a free choice, and it's not a slight on my way that I teach or my relationship with you. It's a choice that you need to make in that moment. I'm here when you're ready is the message that we're sending, because I love having you in my class and I can't wait for you to come back, but it is going to be fun in this environment.
Beautiful. All right. And so I have my one major quote that I always end the podcast off with, and it is, education is what remains once one forgets everything that they learned in school. So I guess for you, Bernii Godwin, when you're speaking, giving workshops, giving presentations, what is it that you want people to take away from their time with you specifically that they won't get anywhere else?
Oh, great question. I want people to take away the idea that there's not a right and a wrong way, but that we can all recalibrate and rebound to joy by paying attention to what's going on for us. And how do we balance both relationship and responsibility collectively at the same time in how we first manage ourselves and then how we bring other people into our sphere of influence. So I honestly think that teachers are doing this already. What my hope is just to name what teachers are doing, and that they'd be hearing even on this podcast and turning to their peer and going, this person's just saying what I've been saying all along. But we're giving a collective voice to, this is already what teachers are doing. This is already what most of us believe to be true. But collectively having a voice into it means that we can take it beyond just what we're doing on a day-to-day basis, and we can impact school environments or communities and nations.
Beautiful. All right. Bernii Godwin, loving our students on purpose. Thank you so much for coming on today.
Thank you so much, Lucas.